26th of October, and of course President Kenyatta is poised to win this, looking at the figures that have already been displayed, of course also after the main opposition NASA leader Raila Odinga pulled out of the repeat elections. Opposition leaders have actually vowed not to recognize President Uhuru Kenyatta's victory in the repeat poll. Earlier today, those are the images of what happened when NASA leader Raila Odinga visited one of the areas that was torn by clashes. Of course, the violence that have been reported in Kenya. The NASA leaders termed the Thursday vote as flawed, and of course the leaders are expected to declare their next course of action on Monday. Already they have voted to declare and swear in Raila Odinga as president if Uhuru Kenyatta is sworn in. There also have been calls for dialogue between Odinga and President Kenyatta, but Odinga says he is open to dialogue with Kenyatta's camp, but only about holding what he calls a free and fair election in 90 days. The looming standoff between the government and the opposition has done more damage to Kenya's economy, scaring away investors, of course slowing down the economy and depressing tax collections. The Kenya Private Sector Alliance, KEPSA, says that 4-month electioneering period has actually cost the country $7 billion in losses, which most of it coming from the frequent disruption of transport and industrial operations during the campaigns ahead of the August 8th election, and of course during the protests after the nullification of the results later in September. In the past 1 month alone, investors at the Nairobi Securities Exchange have lost $2.27 billion. So our focus tonight on this conversation is on which way out for Kenya as far as this political impasse is concerned. Let me introduce our panelists on the show tonight. We have Dr. Christopher Kayumba, who is a researcher, educator and communication consultant. You have a PhD in peace and development research. Very interesting for this conversation tonight.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Also with us, not new on the show, is Thierry Gatete, a blogger and also a human rights lawyer. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And we're also happy to have Nerima, who is with us via Skype. Let's introduce Nerima Wako, who's the executive director for Siasa Place, a political hub focused on mainstreaming women and youth into politics. Nerima, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Kenya. I want to start with you because you're actually at the heart of it. Could you just explain to us, how would you describe what is going on in Kenya? How can you even define it? What terms would you use to define the current situation where you are right now?
Thank you for having me. I would say that we're in a space where none of us actually understand, because there's been a lot of political and legal jargon going back and forth between the politicians, but also in a sense, divisiveness and fatigue. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a lot of people not quite sure how we're going to move on from this, and what's going to happen if Uhuru is declared president and the next standing that Raila will take, especially considering that he also announced the national resistance movement.
Right. Of course, we'll be talking a bit deeper into what this really means, changing of NASA, or actually including a resistance movement into the NASA, or having a wing for that. But it's important for us to understand, how did we get here as a country, as far as Kenya is concerned? Did we see the signs? Did we see the writing on the wall with all the analysts that we have across Kenya, with all the people and the signs that we saw from the political jargon? Didn't we see this coming?
I wouldn't say that we saw this coming. The Supreme Court ruling on September 1st was actually a shock for many Kenyans. Mm-hmm. It has never been done before in Africa. Mm-hmm. So when we heard that it had to be done in 60 days, people were not sure that it was going to be done in 60 days. They didn't quite think the IBC would be capable of having an election. Mm-hmm. So even though there were petitions in court to stop the election from happening on October 26th, because opposition felt that the IBC was not prepared, the judges missed that court ruling because it was announced a public holiday. So the election went forward anyway. But now we are beginning to see that there was so much apathy, because now the voter turnout was 40% now. So that means a lot.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead. I want you to finish your statement.
That was done. It's okay.
All right. So let me bring in Dr. Kayumba here. All the way from, miles and miles away from Kenya, where all this is happening. Didn't we see this coming as a region, probably as Rwanda? Were the signs, visible for people to see and prepare adequately to stop it from escalating to the level at which it is right now?
I think, as Wako says, after the August 8th elections, I don't think that anybody expected that the Supreme Court would rule against the winner. That is what was not expected, because even election observers had had announced that the elections were free and fair. So, and also learning from the 2013 elections, the Supreme Court ruled against Raila Odinga. So, and as history tells us, historically, it had never happened that an incumbent wins an election and it is annulled. So from that standpoint, up to 1st of September, nobody expected that we would get where we are today. But after the annulment of that election, and listening to the Jubilee story and the NASA story, then you started seeing signs that possibly there would be a stalemate. Because the NASA story, NASA of Raila Odinga, was demanding that the Electoral Commission be disbanded, that certain things be changed, saying that there is no way you can trust the Electoral Commission that organized the flawed election to organize another election. And of course, Jubilee, although President Uhuru Kenyatta was saying that he will run again, he started attacking the Supreme Court, and later on said, there is no discussion around changing the Electoral Commission and stuff. We have to hold elections. Right. So because the two political parties, the two groups were directly opposed to what should be done in order to have a free and fair election, and because only 60 days had been given, the time was so short, then you started seeing that possibly a stalemate is possible. It's possible. So I would say, after the annulment of that election, then we started seeing a possible stalemate, because parties to this conflict, to this contest, were not agreeing on what needs to be done. And they had very limited time within which to organize this. Yes.
Right. Gatete, I mean, of course, they always say in Kiswahili, fahali wawili wapiganapo nyasi ndio huumia. In English, you know, when two bulls are fighting, it's of course the grass that actually bears the brunt of this fight. As a human rights lawyer, of course, looking at the state at which Kenya is today, as far as, you know, the chaos, you know, we have had people losing their lives just because of this particular situation. Dr. Kayumba says there was a level where it was evident that a stalemate was imminent. What then was Kenya supposed to do, you know, to avert this particular crisis?
First of all, I have to say, you know, the politicians have tried to manage it in a way that there hasn't been direct confrontation between peoples from different camps. There were riots against the police and so on, but there was not, it's not like in 2003, when, was it 2003?
2007,
2007, when you know, groups of people who supported each candidate started killing each other. So this is already a good thing. However, coming from Rwanda and speaking as a Rwandan person, my experience is that politics always require dialogue. And what if it was up to us, if it was up to me, if I would have wished that immediately after the Supreme Court decision, both parties would have come together and say, listen, now it looks like we have a crisis. Let's avert the crisis. How can we do that? Because when you look at the things that Raila Odinga was asking, to annul the Electoral Commission, it was not feasible within 60 days as the Supreme Court had ordered. Technically, you have to, the whole hiring process and firing process was supposed to take longer. He even though he expressed, and fairly, because after the Supreme Court decision, it was clear that there were frauds, and he said, I won't be trusting this Electoral Commission, even though he was vindicated in saying that. However, it was not possible to set up a new Electoral Commission within that period of time. practically.
Practically, it was not possible.
So on the other, so he was making a demand that was not able to be met. On the other hand, this electoral commission could have, in itself, said, listen, I am only a facilitator of a process. I'm not the major players of this process. I'm the umpire. Let's resign by ourselves so that the process is swiftly done. Because if they said, all right, after the Supreme Court decision, we resign by ourselves, and let the political players agree on who's the best umpire to rule on this game, it would have been a good thing. If the Electoral Commission posed itself as a bottleneck to a process as well.
And played victim as well.
Even though they were not really, they are only the referee. In a football game, the referee is only the facilitator, not a key player in the process.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, what the Supreme Court did, in my opinion, I found it quite outstanding. It's the first time in history, like Dr. Kayumba said, that the Supreme Court has made a firm decision like this. They did not make. People think they ruled in favor of Raila Odinga. It is not true. They just only, ruled on matters that were brought to them, and they looked at the evidence that was there. So I found that quite bold. So it was a situation where everyone was playing zero-sum game. And in fact, if there's anything they could have done, was to avoid to play zero-sum game and show some leniency.
And this didn't happen. Nerima, I want to hear from you. He says there were actually possible scenarios where we could have actually, sorted this out. If the IEBC, especially those who are being vindicated or actually, said to be the problem at IEBC, if they had actually voluntarily stepped aside, probably would not be here. Is this the same thing that you also feel, according to you?
Well, when you look at the history of the Kenya's electoral bodies, many of them have left. Even if we're talking about Hassan, previously who was there, he was forced out of that position. So it's a very difficult position to hold. As a country, we find it very difficult to trust the electoral system. So it doesn't really matter who's there. You're always going to find someone has a problem with the individual who's there. But we also have to remember that a few days ago, Dr. Kombe, who was one of the main commissioners in the IEBC, she resigned and she left for the US. But she had mentioned that there were party affiliations within the commission, so it made it very difficult for her as an individual to be able to have a fair and credible election when it comes to making decisions as a committee. So what I'm trying to say is, I think we've given too much power to our political parties, because if we were to give them the power to decide the individuals to represent within the commission, of course they are going to assign people who they align with in their party. So it's going to be very difficult to even move forward with making decisions. There should have been negotiation in terms of the political parties coming together. But that never happened. And that's where IBC lost track, because they didn't involve a lot of the stakeholders involved in the process. I'm talking about women, youth, churches, all these different groups. They really tried hard to focus on the political parties who were not willing to negotiate.
Right.
So we find ourselves in this predicament.
Right. And we've had from Gatete, who says that, there's always something good when, people talk, and it's important to talk. But the challenge has always been that in 2007 and 2008, during the post-election violence, there was a coalition government that was born out of talks. And my question is, those talks that took place that were, mediated by Kofi Annan and a team of eminent leaders from the region, what are the things that were not touched on that have come to haunt Kenya today? Because some people felt that we have actually found a solution to this, but it didn't work. Today we are back to that same position, a stalemate.
I would broadly say that the stalemate, the challenge Kenya faced after the 2007-2008 electoral violence led to the new constitution. And this new constitution has two major things that I think most people say that it is very progressive and addresses the problem. One is the devolution of power to counties. The second is reducing presidential powers, and also even how the Electoral Commission is appointed, even how the judiciary is appointed. Within that mix, at least as far as I can see, the problem with the new constitution, it is that it retained the majoritarian type of political system, which, as Kenya is structured today, and bearing in mind the role of power and controlling central government, how that affects access to opportunities, access to jobs, access to the power to decide
Yes.
who sits where.
Yes.
I think that political system is not, although the power of the presidents were reduced, is not, in my view, a good system that addresses the traditional challenges of power. But
So
also,
which way out? Which way out? What would be a good system that actually addresses the traditional problems that face Kenya as far as politics is concerned?
in order to understand the solutions, the way out, you need to look at the root cause of this challenge, because there is the immediate challenge Kenya is facing, which is this, because even this election, if you look at it objectively, it was really a referendum. It was a referendum about who among the two competitors, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, who among them really commands the Kenyan public. And if you look at the electoral turnout, the turnout, the chief of the Electoral Commission first said 48%. Now he's talking about 42.8%. Others are saying 35%. That means that although Uhuru has won the right to be declared president, Raila Odinga has won the right, the actual meat, the actual power to say that the vote was stolen because he demanded that his supporters don't go to vote. Okay. And since the turnout is very low, he has even won the PR job. So the immediate challenge is to deal with the legitimacy of the new president in view of Raila Odinga saying that he's now going to call for civil disobedience. So ruling Kenya is going to be problematic. But even if that, and of course there are three things that can be done to address that. The first is the ideal, which I think none of them will probably take. The ideal is, as my friend Gatete was saying, is to realize the biggest challenge Kenya is facing, which is making it ungovernable, and then sitting down and probably share power. Because if you see the positions of Raila Odinga is saying we have to agree on 90 days
and go for fresh
elections. President Uhuru Kenyatta will say, I have been re-elected. Now he has over 98 point something.
Yes.
So he will say that so the second is for President Uhuru Kenyatta to say no. I won fairly and squarely. Let us talk about the future of Kenya, but when there is no sharing power, there is no re-election again, then that is likely to be rejected by, and of course it is likely to be rejected by Raila Odinga, and then then you will see violence, because the expectation, the announcement on Monday by the opposition, by NASA, is probably calling for demonstrations, probably calling for boycott of certain events.
Yes. But they've said, they've said they're going to swear in Raila Odinga if Uhuru is declared president. At that point, let me bring in Nerima again before we come to Gatete. Nerima, look at this scenario where we're already hearing that, President Uhuru Kenyatta said that he's ready to reach out for conversation on the way out as far as the situation is concerned in Kenya. But Raila says, or his team says, we actually won this on August 8th. We do not want a nusu mkate. We're not the ones who want a nusu mkate. The whole loaf of bread belongs to us. So if you look at this from that perspective of actually power sharing, which doesn't seem to be something that may happen, looking at the standpoints and the headlines that each of the sides is actually putting. If you come back to the Rwandan, democratic model, it's actually centered on sharing of power, where, political parties with this number of, votes get this particular position. It's not a winner-take-all situation. Do you think that is the problem for Kenya as far as winner-takes-all is concerned today?
I believe that it is. And it's something that is going to be with us for a while, especially when we talk about devolution, and we're excited about how power has been decentralized from the capital city. We're beginning to see that there are issues within clans, where the majority clans are the ones who rule the counties. So we're seeing this tribalism trickle down. And perhaps it's right, we do need a shared sort of leadership. We've had people talk about conversations about altering positions of power to different tribes with different terms, just so that people do not feel a form of injustice. But to talk about a question that you talked about earlier, we have to talk about reconciliation, because after 2007, 2008, there was no reconciliation. We still have people who are living in IDP camps, who lost property, who lost children, but there was nothing done for them. And so when we have that sort of anger still building up, and we see a population of people who feel marginalized, and they feel that this government does not stand for them, this particular election actually divided the country even more, because we were able to see the strong support of Uhuru. And a lot of times when he was speaking, he would not talk as if the country is united. He only talked about the country being united the weekend before the election, that Sunday when they had a national prayer day. So when people feel that they don't have access to power, they belong to a particular tribe, it's not just going to disappear. And this is not something that can just happen in terms of sharing power temporarily. This is a deep-seated, deeply rooted issue that we're having in our country. And the only way to move forward, we have to start talking about different kinds of government. Because we can look at Germany, where they have political parties in the Bundestag, where the majority party has to work with minority parties. So we need to have places where, in the past, we had opposition leaders and opposition parties working with the majority party. So why did that go?
Right.
So these are some of the conversations we need to have.
Right. Neriman, listen, there's this issue of, having the devolution, which Dr. Kayumba also mentioned here, and it was seen as a plus for Kenya because finally, people from the counties would feel like they have their own president in their governors, and the governors would have their own governments, having ministries, to govern those particular counties. This was aimed at actually ensuring that we lose a bit of interest in the presidency as such. Why did this happen? I mean, why doesn't this work? Why the obsession in my community being the president, or a member of my community being the president, and not focusing more on the county government and pushing your governors to actually work for you?
I think in a sense we have seen devolution at work, because we have seen counties like Wajir having a road for the first time, and in other counties they have access to development. So what devolution has done is spread the resources and finances. It has also spread corruption. But even though the presidential seat is still as powerful, because it still has access to tenders, it still has access to business deals, it still has access to a lot of financial conversations that happen within the capital. So even though devolution is a great change, it's not necessarily as quickly as we had hoped for. So it's going to take a lot more time for us to see that change. But I think we also saw in this election, because the turnout was so low in areas that should be strong, but because of the distance, people couldn't travel from the city to go and vote at home, which was up north. And they didn't think that they needed to vote because they had already voted for their governor, their senators, their MC. In fact, they were like, who cares who's president? I already know in my county the person that I voted for has won. So we're beginning to see that discussion now changing within the Kenyan context.
Right, perfect. Gatete, do you think it's time for Kenyans again to go back to Bomas of Kenya for another reevaluation and conversation about amending the constitution as far as this issue of, allowing for power sharing, looking at solutions to when we have such an impasse? Because there was sort of, a cloud on what happens if the repeat election is delayed because we had 60 days, and after the 60 days, what was going to happen? And probably this is why there was this rush. We have to do it because we are worried we do not want to get into a constitutional crisis. Do these things, or have these things prompted a scenario where we should be seeing people going back to Bomas of Kenya to discuss, amendment of the constitution?
State building is a perpetual negotiation among members of a society of the state. It's not only now that it's the time to go back to negotiate. It must be something that happens on a daily basis. The moment you have parties that are defying each other, state building is not about defiance. It's about negotiation, perpetual, all the time, continuously. The constitution is supposed to fit this whole idea that we have in Rwanda of homegrown solutions. What does it mean? It means you look at the society that you have, that you inherited for historical, natural reasons, and you try to find a solution that will ensure that that society live in a stable and progressive fashion. So, the problem with these constitutions that have templates is that they tell you this is how government is supposed to be ruled, but societies are not all uniform. A Kenyan society has ethnic issues. The Kenyan people are aware of this. A system of winner takes all will only work if the winner is represented throughout the country, right? If, in Kenya, I've been reading in the media, they say this is a Raila stronghold. Yes. This is a Kenyatta stronghold.
Yes.
You can't do a winner-takes-all system if there are strongholds. You do a winner-takes-all if no one has strongholds, if people converge upon ideals, not ethnic issues. So when you have strong ethnic groups, you negotiate among the strong ethnic groups. A president is not more important than the people. Elections are not more important than peace, and so on. So what am I meaning about this? We have systems, and I'm going to just... In Rwanda, I asked a member of a different political party than the RPF why their party was endorsing President Kagame. When are they going to be in power? It was a leader of PL. They told me, but we are in power, right? She was the leader of PL. I asked her why they endorsed President Kagame. She said, when are they going to be in power? She said, but we are also in power.
So there's a sense of
power
inclusion.
Power is for all of us. So we're not endorsing them. We're endorsing ourselves.
Yes.
By endorsing this candidate, we're also endorsing ourselves. If someone in Luo Nyanza feels that Kenyatta is defending their interests, then you'd have a system of winner takes all. But as long as people know that only my group will defend and protect my interests, then you have to negotiate with all the groups. Now, there's one thing I would like to also point out, is that people have fears and angers. One group is saying power belongs to us. Those people are about to take it away from us. Another group says those people have taken the power, we have to take it from them. Because they believe they've been disenfranchised, and the other ones believe that when we have power, it's our right to disenfranchise them. Now, visionary leaders are not supposed to surf on that anger and fear. In fact, they're supposed to appease their groups and saying, those people can be trusted, even if they had the power, we must be able to trust them to deliver for us, and vice versa.
Right.
Let me add 2 points,
yes.
actually. One point is, I think it is possible. It is possible to have, for political parties, for politicians to have strongholds. And a society succeeds. But that is only possible.
And still have a winner-takes-all system?
The winner-takes-all. But that is only when a society and politicians, especially politicians and political parties, are built around ideas, are built around policies. They are differentiated, political parties or politicians are differentiated in terms of ideas, in terms of policies. You look at this just concluded elections. What were the issues? Can anybody say that the major issues that differentiated Raila Odinga from President Uhuru Kenyatta was A, B, C, D? I didn't see the ideas. So that challenge of building, having political parties or politicians who are not differentiated by ideas but by tribe is very problematic. Secondly, the point that I am very suspicious of in Kenya and in many countries is the issue of tribe. Many people are saying that the challenge in Kenya and in many parts of Africa is tribe. Me, I don't think that intrinsically the tribe is a problem.
What is the problem?
I believe that the main problem is what the tribe brings you. And if you look at contestants in this past election, they were not just these two men. There were other 6 candidates. These 6 candidates come from different political parties. I mean, from different tribes.
But they were seen as flower girls in this. They were just ceremonial.
Why are they not supported when they also
by
belong
their
to,
own people?
By their own people. Most politicians in Kenya, the historical politicians like Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, even the other principals in this NASA and Jubilee, they are people who have benefited from state positions. So their societies do not support them necessarily because they share a tribe, but because they have been in power and helped them to access certain privileges. So what you need, Kenyans are not supporting anyone because it's coming from their tribe. They are supporting somebody who has been in central government and used that position to give them access to opportunities. Therefore, what you need to change that logic is not to change or blame tribe, but make access to opportunities and services impersonal. To do that, you need a system whereby politicians are promoting the idea of identity, a national identity, not a tribal identity. And that is where the founding fathers of Kenya, both Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta, that is where they failed. Because this contest between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga is an inherited contest.
Stems from way back there.
So it is not tribal, it is how they used their positions to reward those who come from their regions. Right. Therefore, the problem is not tribal.
Right. Let me hear from Nerima what she thinks on this. Nerima, if you're still there with us, you've been able to hear what the 2 panelists in studio have actually talked about. Dr. Kayumba says it's actually not a tribal issue. I mean, there's a failure by Raila Odinga's father, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, the late, and the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Actually, that dynasty, that fight that started long ago, that's the problem that actually is putting Kenya where it is today. Is this the same thing you're also reading from your perspective?
I would have to agree with Dr. Kayumba in terms of what does belonging to your tribe give to you. In terms of thinking about our politics, it is individual-based politics. People vote the individual, not necessarily the tribe that they belong to. The tribe that they belong to is the bonus. And I would say that our political leaders, it comes back to our history. How is the foundation of our history taught? Because when you talk to a lot of young people, the independence of our country was fought for by a Mau Mau. And that's it. And the country is also supported, but they're also majority of them soldiers. But when you look deep into our history, you find that there were other tribes involved in the independence process. We can talk about the Nandi, we can talk about Coast, we can talk about Luos as well. It might have not have been through arms and killing, but it was also through using resistance and brilliant ways to fight colonialism. But that's not what is taught in. So that's why you begin to hear that certain tribes feel a sense of entitlement, that the country belongs to them because they fought for the freedom of this country, and the rest of the tribes need to understand that about their position.
Right, because actually, let's face it, today what you hear from those who are supporters I mean, those who are against Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, they feel that, Kenya has been led by two tribes. They actually mentioned that. They feel like these two tribes cannot lead us for the rest of our lives, and that is why we feel like we need to also have someone from another tribe. And so it brings back this issue of tribal politics, that if you are from Kikuyu Nation, for example, and you are vying for presidency, you stand a high chance to get the backing of the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu to be able to win the presidency. And if you're from Luo, then you stand a chance of not getting the support of those from the Kikuyu land. I mean, how do we get out of this?
Not necessarily, because when we think about 2007, Deputy President William Ruto at the time was actually part of ODM. So he was in opposition, and Kalenjins were voting on Raila's side. So the coalitions are not constant. They change, and that's the thing with our country. The parties, they don't fall on ideologies. And just like Doctor mentioned earlier, what was the difference between Jubilee Manifesto and NASA? But I know them because I read their manifestos, and Jubilee was focusing on the economy while NASA was focusing on social issues and integration and justice and bringing the people together and national cohesion. But that's not what they were talking about in their campaign rallies, not at all. At their campaign rallies, it was about bashing each other and insulting one another and building this form of animosity and trust. And the thing about also the evolution that it has brought is this vernacular station. A lot of the insults that happen in their native language. So that's how you find individuals with this identity politics find it easier to speak to their followers in their own native language. But then when they come to speak English, they speak in a more monotone, talking about policies. But as soon as they change to their native language, it's very divisive politics.
So one of the way out is actually to ban all vernacular radio and TV stations?
Not to ban them, but to monitor them.
Monitor them.
There's nobody monitoring what is being aired on those stations, and communications agencies are not holding people accountable. NCIC is an institution that exists for this sort of language in our airways, but they have not prosecuted a single individual.
Right, perfect. This is actually where we take a very short break. Of course, when we come back, we read some of the tweets that have been coming through. Just let me sample some of them. We have one from Minega who says, "Winner takes it all is definitely problematic for a country as tribal as Kenya. Obviously, majority tribes keep winning." And of course, this one from Kevin says that Kenya, we are okay. We voted in large numbers. The constitution is very clear. Hakuna matata Kenya. Kenya daima. This is what Kevin is saying. What's your take, Wako, on that tweet?
There are people who are living in a bubble, honestly.
So you feel he's living in a bubble. Another one from Abiola Isaac says Raila should be imprisoned and peace be restored. Imagine the business deficiencies so far caused after he has now formed NRM. Do you think Raila should be imprisoned? Is this a solution? Is this one of the solutions?
No, I think if that happened, that would even make a bad situation worse, because this is a political, problem. It does not require a legal or force solution.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to take a very short break. We're coming back in just a bit. Keep tweeting. The hashtag is InFocusRW. Which way out for Kenya? From where you're seated, just think about a solution and share that solution with us. We'd love to hear from you. Use the hashtag InFocusRW. I'll be able to sample some of those views in the course of the show. Stay with us.
Magic FM.
isaha rero y'isa 10:18 of course ni Magic Drive turi kumwe mpaka isa moya z'umugoroba. dukomeje kudutega amatwi kuri 90.7 Magic FM ace kumwe na Gerard ndetse na Michelle Iradukunda.
mwaramutseho nanone iki ni ikiganiro Magic Morning mwumva kuva kwa mbere kugera kuri gatano tugikora kuva saa 2 za mu gitondo kugera saa 3 za mu gitondo ni mukuru rushi.
Magic FM.
Right, thank you so much for still being with us. It is In Focus, and my name as always is Eugene Anangwe. We are here talking about the way out for Kenya. Of course, we would love to read your comments concerning your thoughts on which way forward or which way out for Kenya as far as the political situation right there is concerned. I'm reading your tweets. Keep them coming. Use the hashtag InFocusRW. Simply write InFocusRW. I'll be able to read them. I have Odas Kubimana who says, I live in Nairobi and my opinion is the IEBC should declare the winner ASAP, whose priority should be to unite the country at whatever cost. And I want to hear from you, Nerima. The IEBC has not yet announced or declared President Uhuru Kenyatta the winner. Of course, when you look at the numbers, as far as what we see is concerned, it's obvious. He is definitely in the lead. But a vote that had a low turnout, you know, as far as what we saw is concerned, this long period that has taken to actually declare Uhuru Kenyatta the winner, how bad is that for the situation, or how good is it for the situation as it is today?
Well, constitutionally, the IBC has 7 days to make an announcement. And I believe that this time around, they are more careful about the process. Because if you remember, on August 8th, the President Kenyatta was announced the winner before 10,000 polling stations had submitted their Form 34Bs. So I believe this time they are a little bit more careful about how they share the information. So it's not surprising to me that they are taking their time and trying to make sure they get as much forms as possible before they make the announcement.
All right. Dr. Kayumba, some people are arguing that actually this is causing more tension. This is causing more problems. NASA has also just dared the IEBC, go ahead and declare Uhuru the president. Are they setting a trap for the IEBC?
I think the IBC set a trap for itself even before the vote. Because if you remember, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, a few days to the vote, he said that he could not promise to deliver a free and fair election. And that was also in line with what Dr. Kombe had said, the commissioner who resigned and announced that she announced this when she was already in New York, New US. So, and also 2 days ago, immediately after the vote, the electoral chairman said 48% was the turnout.
About 6.5 million.
Then immediately after 1 hour, less than an hour, he came back with announced on Twitter that the turnout was 35%. So I think all this caused a lot of, if you see what has been, what different parties to this conflict are saying, both in NASA and the other day, yesterday, the Vice President Ruto was on CNN saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta had won with over 7 million votes. Yes. You know, so all this and the delay shows that whatever outcome will be contested.
It will be contested.
And of course, there is a lot of cloud surrounding whatever will come out, because both of how AIBC has handled itself before and during this election, but also because of what contestants are saying, what NASA is saying, and what Jubilee is saying.
Dr. I've just elevated you to a doctor. Gatete, from a legal perspective, of course, those are images from Kenya, file images. But what I wanted to ask you, from a legal perspective, Dr. Kayumba says that expect a contestation of these results as far as once they are announced. Legally speaking, from the perspective of a lawyer, if this is to happen, the impact that it has, doesn't it bring in more fatigue on Kenyans, telling them again, you need to go back for another election? Which brings to the question, is the election the problem? Because NASA says we want to discuss, but only on another election within 90 days. Is that the solution? Is that the way out for Kenya?
I do not think, yes, you've reminded that I'm a lawyer, but I don't think this is a place for lawyers to get involved. And I do not think the law was the problem. I think this is a place for dialogue. It's a place for politicians, for politics, for good politics, good governance.
Yes.
So if the NASA announces and then there is contestation, what happens? If NASA has promised that it will swear in a candidate. So this is, again, we're back to square one where every group is defying the other. We don't want defiance in a situation that the tension is very tense.
Yes.
It might escalate into an incendiary situation. So we don't want a situation where we push this to breaking point. And in all likelihood, if people do not sit down and give guarantees to the other, this is the time. I'm looking at the tweets that you're reading and the comments people are making. There are tweets of saying that person should go to jail, or if that person does this, we will do this. Maybe it's time to say, oh, can we sit? Can we reach out? We reach out, we appease the other party, we will give concessions and so on. Maybe it's time to start speaking the language of appeasement, not a language of defiance. Because both parties, and one thing that is interesting to point out, even though Raila Odinga might claim that the low turnout means the rest of the people were on his side and he'd be right to claim so, but it's not true necessarily. We'll never verify. This is only one factor. The fact that he boycotted is only one factor to the low turnout. There's so many factors involved in a low turnout. So therefore, no party should really be emboldened to take an action of defiance at this point.
Right.
In the interest of the people.
In the interest of the people. Let me bring back Nerima. Nerima, from your organization, I mean, what happens now? Because, Gatete says, it is time to actually to dialogue. It is not time to actually to chest thump. But we are seeing a lot of chest thumping going on social media. The deputy president also tweeted, attacking several NASA leaders. We've seen the Jubilee camp claiming that actually we have won. We have actually, given validity to actually the numbers that took place or that came out in the August 8th election. On the other hand, NASA is saying we are not ready to talk to you if we are not talking about election. So what do organizations like yours and other like-minded Kenyans do when the principals on both ends refuse and stick to their hardline positions? What should you do? What will you do?
Well, it's a difficult place to be in because there's a lot of apathy, especially amongst the youth. They don't believe that the leaders that we have are going to bring about any change. And a lot of them are very worried and concerned about the future of this country. But I think we cannot chest stamping at this point because both those political leaders have very, very many followers. So they need to come to a place where there is compromise between the two because they each have a wealth of followers behind them. So this is not just one individual. And I know that the situation is tense because just a few days ago we saw MPs almost exchanging words and fighting to a point at a press conference.
Yes.
So we can see that if our own leaders are already throwing blows at one another, what do we expect on the ground with young people? So definitely we need to return to reason. We need to, as a people, put our country first and what we want for our country. Because even when we're talking about this process of being in an electioneering politicking period is draining the people. And not only that, economically, we've lost about 700 billion shillings. So how are we going to pick up as a country economically if we're constantly having these conversations with one another?
Right. And as your closing remark, because also time is up, I want just to add on to what the point you made about the leaders who are actually fighting during a press conference. But Nerima, you are the people who vote them. That means you have the power. You have more power than them. So how come they're actually able to do these things and we are not able to call them to question and call them to action to stop? I'm trying to ask, what is the role of the ordinary citizens who actually give them that power through that ballot? What should they do? They're always left out of this call for dialogue or this dialogue process because we always seem to give more emphasis or importance to the principles of this, stalemates.
The people have to speak up. We've been seeing press releases from CSOs, from the church, from activists, but people really need to speak up and come united under one voice. I think we're clouded politically, that we don't want to think as a people, but I believe that in the next few days, we've reached a wall where people are saying enough is enough. And so we see a lot more conversations coming from professionals, because those are the ones who, especially the middle class, they sort of create this bubble that things are okay and they don't need to do anything about it.
All right. Gatete, I mean, for you, talk to me as the closing remarks as well. To appease the followers of Raila Odinga who feel disenfranchised and the bone taken from their mouth, what would be given to him that would make these people cool down? What are the options?
All right, so since it's not my decision to make, I'm going to go as wild as I can.
Yes.
In Switzerland, they have a system of collegial presidency.
Yes, make it really brief.
Yes.
Yes.
In Switzerland, they have a collegial presidency where the most powerful cantons, so that's the regions, are all represented with presidents. And all of them have the same power. Every month or every now and then, one of them take a ceremonial role to open factories and receive guests. And
So you want Raila Odinga to go and open factories?
No, I want Raila Odinga to. I don't want nothing. I'm not Kenyan, but I'm saying it would be interesting. Why did they do this? They did this because they had the same tribal or sense of belonging.
Yes.
That was powerful.
Yes.
So if you had the Kalenjin, the Luyas, the Kikuyus, the Luos, and so on, all together represented into power, the sense of tribal politics would disappear with itself, because no one would see it as a channel for political ascension, because they know all of them are represented equitably at the helm of power.
All right. Dr. Kayumba, what would be given?
Quick things.
Very briefly, yes.
We have a saying in Kinyarwanda that whoever does not talk to his dad will never know what the grandfather left behind. So the solution to this problem is in the history of Kenya and the context between their fathers. That is number one. What do they need right now is not pretending about who is going to be Kenya, who's going to be the leader,
Yes.
but to unite Kenyans. It is in the history. That is what their fathers failed to do, to unite Kenyans around the idea of Kenya and sharing Kenya. And therefore, number two, to understand the position of a president in resolving that, because we pretend that when we elect a president, we are just electing a leader who is going to, we forget that we are also electing the distributor in chief of wealth, finally. For Kenya to have sustainable peace, these two men have to agree that for now, what they should do is to put in place a period to construct a future for Kenya, and therefore, for example, allow that President Uhuru, for example, can rule for 2 years, and then within that period, organize elections after the review of the constitution and changing the electoral system whereby the winner takes all, because that is not serving the Kenyans. Otherwise, if a compromise is not found, then it is impossible to say that sustainability and stability and peace
is going to be
is assured. Yes.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Nerima, as well, for joining us. Of course, it's been a conversation that we really, really need to have as a region. Of course, it's not time to actually say that that is Kenya and we have nothing to do with it. Of course, Kenya is a neighbor, and as an economic powerhouse as well, whatever happens right there, affects the region in one way or another. You have relatives in Kenya. Of course, you cannot sit back and just say that that is their own problem. We need to talk about this. Let's keep the conversation going. #InFocusIW. Let's keep talking. And of course, we'll see you again next week, same time, same place. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.
Rondair, renowned for its tremendous ability to fulfill your dreams, invites you to connect more with your friends and family in Europe with 3 weekly flights to Brussels, one of the most popular cities for the African diaspora. Take advantage of the exquisite service on board our punctual flights, connecting you to over 22 other destinations in our fast-growing network.
Rondair, fly the dream of